welcome to the Dadhammer podcast, a casual Warhammer show where we discuss all things 40k, Age of Sigmar, and literally everything else Warhammer related. So whether you are a beginner, a seasoned veteran, or wherever you are, we're glad that you joined us on your Warhammer journey. I am your host, David the Warboss, and I am joined by my friend Medicae Steve. Steve, how we doing?
Man, it's all good, my friend. Everything is
Yeah.
great. It's good to be here. It feels weird. I feel like we're off a schedule, and it just seems like it's been a long time, but it hasn't been a long time. I don't know, man.
No.
It's like stuck in a
No.
warp.
I know we've got now for those that have been listening to us for we're coming up on a year. We
Yeah, it's
started in
crazy.
April of 2023. We're coming up on a year for those that have been listening for the last several months. It used to be just Steve and I, and now we've expanded and we've got some other folks on our team. You've heard Chief Librarian Lawson. You've heard the Chaplain. You've heard the Bearded Ogre. Our friends
Hmm.
Lee and Stu. So we're trying to rotate a little bit out here and there, and then today it's just Steve and I. Chaplain's got work, and the Bearded Ogre has been hit with Nurgle again. He's come down with COVID. So it just
Kill it with
we
fire,
just.
dude.
I know. So we're the only ones, and I remain Captain Immunity, and
Ah, yes.
it's yeah. I don't get sick very often, and of course everybody's like, oh, now you're gonna get sick, so
Mm,
go ahead, knock on wood, because it's getting ready to happen. I don't do that. I don't believe in that stuff. So I'm just
nah.
gonna continue Captain Immunity, and then if I do, Steve, you can put me to sleep
There you go.
with your
No problem.
profession.
Yeah, I work in a festering germ pit. That is a hospital. So I think I'm been inoculated with every
It
horrible thing known to man.
Yeah, it sounds pleasant. Um, Not at all,
Mm,
but if you say hospital, it's better. If you say
yeah,
what'd you call it? Germ infested
yeah, like
cesspool, pit of
yeah,
doom.
pit of doom, pit of infestation and plague. And no, it's not that bad. Just wash your hands. Don't touch your
Yeah, yeah.
eyes and wash your
Just yeah.
hands.
Okay, cool. Expert advice. Well, anyway, we are so very glad that you have joined us. We've got a great show for you. We are going to do a little recap on the Vanguard Tactics interview we just had with Stephen Box. It was an outstanding, very interesting interview. So make sure you go check that out. We'll talk about that here and a few takeaways. We're going to talk also Dark Angels. So, Steve, I know that you're very excited
Yay!
about the Dark Angels Codex dropping soon and all the new stuff coming out. So, we'll give our reactions. The other thing that we're going to talk about here is something that has hit the last 3 issues of White Dwarf, which is a lot of combat patrol stuff. So they're really doubling down on it. So we're going to talk
Mhm.
about that and maybe what the implications are. Good stuff. Thank you so much for listening to our show. If you like what you're hearing, make sure to, leave us a review. I've seen a few reviews out there, written reviews. I always love to read those. So please leave us more of those, and we will read them on the show. I want to get a few that are a little more recent, but I'd love to hear from you. So make sure you drop us a review. Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're consuming this content. And also, if you want to reach out to the show, contact at dadhammerstudios.com. If you want us to cover any specific topics, there is a channel for you to do that as well. All right, good stuff.
Yeah.
Let's get into the content now. And I want to first, I'll throw up this picture here. This was our interview with Mr. Stephen Box. And man, if you haven't had a chance to talk to this guy or meet him somewhere, maybe at a tournament, or even go to the website or the YouTube channel, he he's just a great dude. I mean,
Mhm.
I think that's he is all things integrity, and I thought probably the biggest takeaway from our interview, very fascinating chat with him, and one of the biggest takeaways that I had was his whole notion of being a great opponent. And Steve, I know you and I are we're not tournament goers. Maybe this year, maybe
Maybe
maybe.
something. We'll try it.
Um, because we always just feel like total noobs when it goes to. I mean,
Mhm.
we've been playing for a while, but still feel like, oh man, I'm never going to get all the rules right. And he
Mhm.
was really good about saying that it's really not. That's not the point. The point is to
Right.
not to try to memorize everything. And I thought his wording of trying to be the best opponent possible really encapsulates what you can do to prep for a tournament. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't have to memorize everything to be a great opponent. You just have to do some homework, know your army, know the game, practice a little bit, and get there and just be cool to play with, be nice, and
Mhm.
make sure that you're kind to the other person, and you're not cheating, or you're playing honestly. I don't know, Steve. I just thought that was like the big revelation. It was so simple, such a simple thing to be a great opponent, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, you and I talked about it, and I don't know about you. I've even felt kind of not shy, but just sort of reserved to even go to
Mhm.
not so much like Blackthorn or Mechanical Keys because we've gotten to know a lot of people there, so it doesn't feel like a strange place, right?
Yeah.
Um, I feel like the Games Workshop shop store in itself near us, I never get the feeling when I'm there, but the thought of playing a game there, because I'm like, I don't know any of the folks there. I have no point or references to experience or anything like that. I've even been a little bit reserved about going and playing a game there because there's something about walking in that store though, you're like the level is just different because that's
It goes up.
all.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
feels like
everywhere
it.
else has, like, Magic and other card games and a D and
Mhm.
D and all kinds of stuff going on, so it's just kinda like a big clubhouse and everybody's cool. You walk into a Games Workshop store, it's like, "This is it." There is no, like, "Hey, what are you guys doing over here?" Like, "Well, you know what I'm doing over here because 'cause you're doing it over there." So everybody's there for one very specific reason, and that gets a little intimidating in some ways, you know?
Yeah.
So, I
It's
don't know how
it's like
you feel about
you're
that.
yeah, isn't that weird? I mean, we're just walking
It is
into a
weird.
store, but I feel
Yeah.
like, oh man, I need to be. It's like walking into an interview.
Mhm,
You know,
mhm.
better have my resume polished up before I go into a Warhammer store. Like, what? That doesn't
Yeah,
make any sense.
and
But
make the
it
leap
does
to tournament play, now we're
exactly,
different
and
different things.
it's for whatever reason it's a little intimidating, and I think part of that is just because all of us have this concern that we're going to be found out. Like, oh man,
Yeah,
somebody's going to play against us and realize that maybe we only remember 60% of what's in the rule
mhm.
book. But the more people I play against, the more I know that that's about everybody.
That's about right.
Honestly, you may have it locked down on one particular rule, but every single time we play, I'm forever having to look up what the heck the benefits of cover are again. I mean, I know
Yeah,
I get the okay +1, but now wait a minute. What about the? I was just looking in the recent issue of White Dwarf and then the basic training, where it's got the line of sight, and so I read it
oh,
again.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Just like, well, wait a minute. I want to be sure that I'm actually playing this right from somebody who knows. And it was the basic training section of Stephen Box
Mhm.
wrote it, and I'm like, okay. I'm good. There is a
Yeah,
benefit of cover, even if only part of the unit can see the other. So
yeah,
just little stuff like that. I don't go to the Warhammer store to play games. I haven't mainly because it's a little bit of a drive for
yeah,
for me.
yeah,
But even then, if I show up, it's just a bunch of people that play the game just like we do. It's so weird to
yeah.
have any kind of intimidation with it. You
It
know what I mean?
is weird, isn't it? I I liked, when you talk about being a good opponent, I feel like I took away from that conversation that nobody's gonna really remember if you had a bad like
Yeah.
remembrance of the rules. What people remember is like, were you fun? Did you have a
Hmm.
good time? Did you laugh with that person? But more so, not remembering the rules. But people are gonna remember if you just didn't play the rules right, like
Yeah.
knowingly went out of your way to just not do a good job
Hmm.
of looking things up and asking questions and being honest and having some integrity. It's like nobody's gonna ever walk away from a tournament and say, "Man, that guy was just he should have read the book." But they will. walk away from the tournament was like, man, that guy should have read the book and not tried to force his will upon
Not
somebody
trying to
else.
cheat. Yeah.
Yeah, not try to cheat. That was
Yeah.
the takeaway that I got from that situation or
Yeah,
conversation.
and the other thing that Steven said too is that he said this on the Vanguard Tactics, the Warhammer, the 40K competitive podcast.
Hmm.
He says like the whole 4-up rule, meaning
Yes.
if we don't know the rule, we're not sure, let's roll for it. Roll a d6, and then 1 to 3 you get it, and 4 to 6 I get it. And his point is, now if you do that, you still don't know whether or not you're playing the correct way, and it's
Hmm.
just the wrong way to look at it. Now, I'm going to say all this. I know this, the Vanguard Tactics ethos, and we're talking about tournament play, and we're still very casual players. I
Right.
mean,
Hmm.
we're Steve, you said this before. We're beer and pretzels kind of
That's
guys,
right.
and but there's some overlap when we get together and we're playing. We expect a level of understanding of the rules, but even then, we want each other to have a really good time. And
Hmm.
I think it's the same thing. It's you can play Warhammer with your friends, but if you go to a game, even a local game store, and you never intend on going to a tournament, I think the same principle applies. Just don't be a jerk. Just
Right.
be nice. Try to help the other person out. Smile,
Hmm.
laugh, have a good time. If you lose, you lose. Were you a good opponent? Were you
Right.
enjoying yourself? I think is the main thing. The other thing that I took away from the interview, which I thought was really interesting, is you know, Stephen talks about really preparing for tournaments, and
Hmm.
I've heard this on some of the other interviews he's done about proper hydration and your diet and being mentally prepared for the games that he's playing, which usually you associate that with an athlete. I mean,
Hmm.
he is kind of an athlete, right? He's done bodybuilding before, but being able to mentally prepare yourself, and I thought, man, why would that matter? And then you start to think about all the games that you're going to play. Warhammer is a fairly mentally taxing game.
Hmm.
I mean, you're
Yeah.
having to make a lot of decisions and calculate a lot of stuff. As much as I mean, I can only calculate so many things at once.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm just not even good at it anymore.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I just thought that was interesting. The diet and the hydration. Don't be dropping Snickers bars and chugging soft drinks and things. Let's make sure
Hmm.
you get plenty of sleep. You're hydrated. That you're eating. Well, actually, is a very minimal amount throughout the day because of all the games that you're playing.
Hmm.
And this may not apply to having a game at your house with some buddies, but I just thought it was an interesting takeaway. So Steve, are you maybe did that resonate with you, or are you still like, yeah, maybe if I went to a tournament, it's something I would think about, or are you still kind of even more casual?
No, I think I mean still more casual. I definitely would think about a tournament now. It's a lot less intimidating, talking that through. And
Right.
I think all of us with the folks that we all play with, I think we've all hit this point now. We don't know all the rules, but we're comfortable with the game.
Mm-hmm.
And we can help each other through the rules. And it might be time to push out and challenge ourselves just a little bit because after a while, I think you stop growing in some ways. Now, I'm not saying that we don't learn something every time we play,
Mm-hmm.
but I kind of know how you're going to play a little bit, and you know how I'm going to play a little bit, and I'm going to do something goofy at some point, and just put it all, just like whatever, let's go, and but we don't press each other on time, which I've never thought about that. You and I don't play and look at the clock and be like, man, we got to get through this because we should be on turn 5 now. We're 2 hours in. We should be
Well,
kind
now
of.
unless we have the wife guilt, right? We're like, oh
Yeah,
man,
she got
if I
other
don't
things
get
to
home,
do.
my wife's gonna kill me.
That's true. Uh, or the weather bearing down, like,
No,
maybe
that's true. Yeah,
we should
yeah.
pack up and be done
Probably
for the
should
day.
go. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't. I find it interesting to think about it. Is yeah, you're not going to break a physical sweat, you know, but the tournament day could be long. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
think I know you've probably done work conferences and those things. I've gone out of town and done training conferences and all that stuff. And you don't think about the exhaustion that gets through, just say, an 8-hour day. Am I sitting through a college course? No. But in some ways, the mental level that you have to kind of adapt to and
Yeah.
be at, it's like sitting in a high level like college course or something like that, because
Mm-hmm.
it's reading, it's math, it's all these things that are going all at once in your head. But it's fun, so let's not really make
Yeah.
it something that's not. But yeah, that's exhausting, and you probably shouldn't show up, a 12-pack night before, and that kind of thing. Now, some people can do it. I can't. I'm too old.
No.
I can't do that at all.
No way.
And but I think that he's got a lot to say there. And if you really want to be successful at it, take that part seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for anyone listening to this that is even mildly interested in attending a tournament, just I would say the main takeaway is just don't be afraid to
Mhm.
go and sign up. I was looking at some of the tournaments, one of the local tournaments. Well, I'll say local, and it's in Atlanta, which is a little bit of a haul for us, but that's they're a little pricey. That was like $300 to go to that
Mm.
tournament, and you really got to want to play Warhammer for 3 days, which sounds awesome to me. But even that is a bit of a barrier to entry. So anyone listening to this, especially for those that are still new to the game or thinking about it, or maybe if they've got family and kids, I would just encourage you to get out there and get to a store, play different people, and figure out whether or not this is for you. Is it worth, or you just hang out at home, play with some buddies? Nothing wrong with that. And
Nope.
but Steve, kind of to your point, you are going to learn more and be a better player by going against other folks. And then of course there's training modules and stuff out there that
Yeah.
you can practice on as well. So if you haven't checked out the interview, please do. It was really, really great to talk to Stephen Box from Vanguard Tactics. I thought it went really well, and it was our first interview, but we've got some additional ones lined up. I'm not going to
Yeah.
spoil it right now, but we've got one coming up in March that is a person well known in the Warhammer community as an influencer and previous employee of Games Workshop. So really cool interview that's going to be coming up. So stay tuned for that. And a little bit of a tease. But
Hey.
yeah, I'm excited. All right. So now let's move on to Steve. This is your day.
Mhm.
This is what you've been waiting for. This is the drop of the
Yep.
Dark Angels Codex and the limited edition Codex there for you.
Mm,
It's only $9,000 more. No, I think it's like
and
30
won't be
bucks
able
more.
to get it. But what? Who knows?
Exactly. Yeah, even if you wanted it. But at least the cover's cool.
It
The
is
cover
pretty
looks
cool.
good. Yeah. But the Dark Angels Codex is imminent. It's coming soon. Was it coming up in the next? Is it coming this weekend? In the next couple of
It went
weeks?
on. It went on pre-order this past weekend, so it should be, what is it, a week or two
Yeah.
after the
So this
pre-order that
is
it hits the store?
so this would be the end of February, early March.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I guess I'll start. We'll throw up a couple of images for those that are
Yeah.
watching. We've got a picture of the Codex and the limited edition ones. We've also got the Dark Angels dice, which I'm a big fan now of. Just army
Just
specific dice.
sold out, by the way. It was
Really?
yeah, it was out. It
Oh my
was
gosh.
couldn't
What
even
is
do
the
the pre
deal? Why?
couldn't even do the pre-order.
I just people, it's like I want
Mm,
to pay you money for things.
mhm.
And but I get it. It's
Yeah,
sometimes the supply and demand. Nintendo would used to do the same thing.
sure
And
enough.
sometimes you ask, oh man, they're just doing this artificially to some kind of crazy conspiracy theory. And I don't, being a businessman myself, I'm like, no, that's not it. They're just they want to make enough product to make money. So when they
Yeah,
sell out, that's bad. They that means that
yeah,
somebody can't pay them more money. So you don't want to artificially do that ever, but you also don't want to have a million things in stock and then no one buys them, and then what do you do with it?
Yeah,
So
stuff sitting on the shelves is bad.
not
Real
good. So yeah, so we got some new stuff here
bad.
coming out for Dark Angels. Steve, this is going to be your show primarily because you're the Dark
Yeah.
Angels player. I will start out and just kind of ask, what are your initial thoughts about all the hoopla coming out for Dark Angels? Good, bad, indifferent. I mean, obviously it's exciting, I'm sure, for new stuff, but what's your overall vibe so far with Dark Angels?
So I was not excited about that launch box with the Deathwing Assault.
Mm,
And it's nothing. I mean, the models are fantastic. Don't get me wrong. But I felt like that was a lot of cash for just a bunch of Terminators. Love Terminators. I just have them. So this is a personal gripe. This is nothing against like saying that, man, how could you guys do this? This was a bad decision, because it's a great decision if you don't play Dark Angels and don't have 20 Terminators, you know.
yeah, Terminators are
So
awesome, though. I mean,
yeah, Terminators are fantastic.
yeah.
It's why I got into Space Marines, was just so I
Mm-hmm.
can build some Terminators. But it just, for me, I was like, oh, really? I mean, I have Terminators. I don't need Terminators. I don't want it. I don't want to. I really, honestly, this is going to be bad. I do not want to really build anymore and paint any more bone white armor at all. Like, I have 5 Terminators. I have 5 Terminators sitting in the what was a Leviathan box that I haven't built yet on purpose,
Oh
because
yeah.
I'm just trying to think of a color scheme other than bone
You can paint them
white.
green.
I'm thinking about painting them black, some sort of
Okay.
black, and do some
Okay.
like fallen or risen now, who knows,
Yeah. Right.
Dark Angels, right? Just do something different. So the thought of painting 20 of those jokers, I just couldn't do it. And it just wasn't like, this is not how I play. We've talked about it. I'm like, I don't throw just a whole pile of Terminators on the board and go to town. I like to mix everything up. So my initial thought was like, oh, what are they going to do to the faction? What are they going to do to the chapter? Because the initial reports were, I don't know, just not thrilling. I really wasn't even sure if I was going to buy the Codex, because I really started thinking I was just going to run the Space Marines Codex and look at one of the several detachments out of there, and what
Yeah.
kind of work
Right. I
with
mean,
them.
you were never gonna do that.
No, I really wasn't. But I thought about it. I was like, there's some pretty good detachments in there that go well with the models I have.
Mm-hmm.
But as more info has dropped and more like, teasers and codex reviews, and because they do let them put those things out early with their NDAs and all that stuff, I started listening to some of the stuff that was being discussed about the codex. I was like, oh, yeah, this will work really good,
Yeah.
because I already have a lot of the stuff, but some of those new units are pretty awesome. The new characters, they're just sort of glow ups from the older characters. I did not have a Belial. I didn't have an Asmodai anyway, because those weren't. I don't know. It didn't feel like the ninth edition up to now, that they were all that big a deal. As long as you had, especially once Azrael came out. Now that guy's no joke. And then they have the lion, and the lion is just an animal. Um,
Yeah. They've
Really
been
expensive
more.
though. Whew.
Dark Angel seems like this, especially recently, have been more character heavy
Yeah, but
than
do
than
you
they
feel
ever
like
have been.
10th has been that way anyway, though? I mean, I think
Well,
we talked about it a long time ago, but
yeah.
do you
I'm.
feel that 10th was headed that way anyway?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't mind it. I think
Mm-mm.
there, and maybe we just didn't notice it with ninth, but I think that 10th there is a lot more focus on individual characters,
Mhm.
epic heroes, and the whole leader aspect of, having leaders attached to certain units. I personally, I really like it. I
I do
like the
too.
thought of, when you're watching any of the animations, or hopefully the upcoming Warhammer shows and movies with that Henry Cavill's doing, it really is about individual character arcs, right? It's
Mhm.
it's the the focus maybe they may show the troops in a pan, or a wide pan type shot where they're seeing all of these guys go up against each other, but then they really narrow in on the character. What's the
Right.
character doing? And so I'm looking. I've got a couple of models here up on the screen now. It's like I can see these guys leading a unit
Hmm.
of troops walking into battle, and so but it's been that way. Playing the chaos. I'm playing orcs, and even with the orcs, they're coming out with more and more characters and named
Hmm.
guys. With the I forget what the name of the new orc thing is coming out with that book that they released, but they're doing more of that with 10th, and I like it personally.
I do too.
So. I mean, Dark Angels. I mean, they haven't historically had a ton of characters. Is that a good thing for you, or do you feel
S-
that you'd rather not see it?
So they have had a bunch of characters over the years. Just you don't really know about them unless you
Well,
play.
yeah, maybe that's what I mean.
Yeah, but to your point though, they weren't necessarily special. Like their data sheet was nothing like all right, their main librarian is
Mhm.
Ezekiel, right? I mean, honestly, you would maybe pay some more points for him. And I think in previous editions, he kind of, this is just very basic, but it felt like he might have picked up a couple of, psychic powers or something like that. But generally speaking, there was nothing extra about him over a normal librarian that you could get for cheaper. And
Right.
that's kind of how a lot of the editions felt across the board. Like it wasn't worth paying the points necessarily for some of the characters because, some of these guys were just barely above a generic captain or a generic lieutenant. Now I feel like these guys are. I mean, Azrael puts out is just a command point factory and bunches of re-rolls and just an absolute animal in melee. Pretty good shooting, but the units you can attach to them is 10th feels like you can attach your units to these leaders and stuff, and it just makes everything so much more synergistic. Now, kind of backing up to our interview with Stephen Box, I guess there was things about ninth I didn't realize that we're kind of doing that. It was just so intimidating and so bloated you couldn't really pick your
Yeah, for
stratagems
sure.
to make yourself do it. They just kind of baked it into everything now. So these characters make a lot more sense now. I actually have Asmodai on order, and just because, well, it's a really cool model, but it's a good character to attach to your units and stuff. So I'm here for that.
Mhm.
And I love the Deathwing Knights. I have a set of Deathwing Knights, um, and they just look fantastic. Um, I never got a lot of mileage out of them in ninth and up to this point, and I don't really know if I will with these either. Their rules have
Well,
changed a little bit. They're a
I
little softer than they were, and
yeah, but
they're
I'm
really expensive for
interested.
what you do.
I'm interested though because whenever, and I don't know if you feel this way. Whenever, especially if it's an army that I already play, and they're coming
Mhm.
out with new versions of models, and if I already have the bulk of the army, they're
Yeah,
going to do this way with the orcs, right? They're not going to release just tons and tons and tons of models. They may come out with some additional orc boys because that's the standby. They don't really need to. I
yeah,
think the orc boy models that they released for the last combat patrol are just fine. They may come out with more sculpts or something like that, but they'll come out with a new unit or two, and then maybe some glow up or upgrades
yeah,
for existing
yeah.
ones. And whenever that happens, because I don't feel that, oh man, I got to buy all of them. I have to buy everything
Mhm.
because I'm starting from scratch. When I already have, I mean, I've got like 3,500 points of orcs.
Right.
I get to pick and choose. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because even if you're not big on Deathwing Knights, if the orcs, if they come out with Storm Boys, those are the
Mhm.
guys with the jetpacks. I want to pick them up because I'm like, oh, I don't have those. I can get them
Right,
now.
right.
It's not like I can't buy them now, but because they are launching with a new codex, a new release
Yeah,
that automatically gives it that, okay, well, that it makes it approachable maybe, or
sure.
easier for me to bring in. So even though you're looking at these Deathwing Knights and like, I never really played them, but because they're right here and they're fancy and new,
Mhm.
you might as well. I
You
don't know
might
if
as
you feel the
well.
same way.
They look good. They look better than the ones I have. I mean, the ones I have look cool.
Hmm.
These look more, um, I don't know, they're very, very intimidating. Uh, there's a mildly cartoonish look
A
to the
little
ones
bit.
that I have, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? They're a little bit like, "Okay, that's cute. Okay."
Yeah. Well, they're the
These
older
guys,
ones.
yeah, it's a lot of the older sculpts are kinda like that. These look great, and I
Yeah.
do have these guys on order, the Inner Circle Companions. Um, I
The Inner
debated my
Circle
way.
guys look awesome.
Oh my gosh, they look so good, and I debated 2 boxes of them because there's only 3 in there, but, I'll just start with 3 and see where it goes from there, but they have fantastic stats out there that have been released. I mean, nothing over the top. They're
Hmm.
not some magic unit. They're kinda like Blade Guard veterans in a lot of ways, but they just look so much cooler. And having read, the Lionel Johnson book, the one where he comes back, The Son of the Forest, these guys are perfect, man. I mean, they're very lore ready. They're very because there's a lot of open-ended questions there as to what's gonna happen with the Dark
They
Angels as far as their
they look
lore.
very mysterious, like just the sculpts themselves and the hoods and the dark,
Yeah.
the way that they've been painted. They just look like what's under the mask. Is what I want
Well,
to. When I look at them, it's like, man, are these guys really ugly? Are they Freddy Krueger under the mask or something? That's what it kind of gives me that vibe.
I think they're fallen Dark Angels. I think that, the Lion is going through and instead of just shoot first and ask no questions, like that has been the Dark Angels policy up to this point.
Mhm.
I think he's trying to redeem some of his lost sons, because some of them
Mhm.
had no idea what they were doing when they were doing it. So I think these guys are just because they're silent. I was reading some of their lore. They have to take this like vow of silence. They never speak. They speak on encoded Vox channels between one another. So like those black stormtroopers from Rogue One, you
Right.
don't really know what their deal is, but
Yeah.
I really think these guys are just, fallen dark angels that not everybody's cool with, but they're like, all right, boss man brought them on, so they must be okay. They got cool swords.
So
So let's
are
go.
you feeling like with all the models that they've shown off that they are
Hmm.
going to release with the codex and the big reveal for Dark Angels, is there anything that you think is missing? Is there anything that you would have liked to have seen
Oh,
that they have, like, oh man, I really missed this.
I missed the Raven Wing. I wish that those models were up to date a little bit.
Hmm.
They're old bikes and they shows. The Outriders look cool. You can still run them. They're in a weird transition period because the old models are the only bikes that are really register anymore, right? All the old bikes in any other chapter are gone away. You can't use them. They're resigned to legend. So, but these old bike models with the Dark Angels and Ravenwing are okay. Um, I don't know how that's going to transition out because you can still run the new Primaris bikes, which are the Outriders, and they have a whole different stat line as the Knights and the
Yeah.
Black Knights and all that stuff. So I don't know. That's going to be kind of weird in the future as far as bringing new models in on that. They had an old school land speeder, which now those are all gone. It was called a Talon Master, and you could run it like a lieutenant, and it was an awesome unit.
Hmm.
So I don't know if they're gonna like update the new speeders, land speeders out there, or if they're trying to push that away. The little the little attack bike with the little sidecar, it's gone completely. I was like, oh,
that
one of my
that I
favorite
mean,
models.
I know, come
It's
on,
kind of
man, but the
goofy.
With the sidecar needed to go. Very,
Had a
very
multi-melt on
90s.
it. It's very good though, even if you get
Yeah.
one shot out of it. But
Well,
yeah, there's some leadership in that. There's some pretty cool character models in that
yeah,
hopefully they'll vamp up, but somebody else can have their turn for now.
sure,
I mean, they don't
sure.
need to do it all at once, right?
What do you think of the detachments, right? The new detachments that the Deathwing and Ravenwing, like they're as part of the
Mhm.
codex. Maybe they're not new per se, but as far as
Right.
like a mechanics standpoint, they're attaching keywords and they're really showing the, I guess because of the main Space Marine Codex, now they're coming out with a chapter specific codex. They've got to figure out a way to differentiate between other
Mhm.
books. So the way they're doing that is with these keywords and having these dedicated detachments. How you feeling? And I put these up on the screen. They showed these on the Warcom site recently. How you
Right.
feeling about the detachments?
So, first splash, when I first saw what was coming out, I was like, "Oh, great. So, I'm gonna either have to play 25 Terminators or I'm gonna have to play, 30 Raven Wing bikes." And I don't have any of that in my army, as
Mm-hmm.
far as, those numbers. Um, I like and I was very concerned that they're just gonna lock you into some sort of model, just hangover where you're just stuck with specific models. I really like how those keywords were applied to a lot of different units. Like the inner circle stuff was put on Stern Guard veterans. Obviously, the inner circle companions. You have a lot of your HQ carry the inner circle keyword. So for me, in the models that I have, and being a already collector of Dark Angels, that's great. I don't have to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. It leaves you some options because so many of the keywords for so many of the abilities, like the deep strike and other things, they also have to carry an infantry keyword. So that's pretty good too. So you're not
Yeah.
gonna feel too bad. You can put some other stuff in there, like your blade guard and a whole bunch of other things. The Raven Guard is still our Raven Wing is still pretty vehicle heavy, obviously. So, um, but it feels there. Okay, there's an aspect to the Raven Wing that I have learned, and I think I understand it, but I won't be able to flesh it out until I have the codex in my hand. But it feels like I could run this Raven Wing detachment, not necessarily be all vehicles, but have a large number of vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't get the full benefit across everything, but they carry some keywords, I think across to some other units that you can add in, like tanks and other stuff, so that you're not just looking at specific Raven Wing models like Black Knights and command squads and other things like that, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, well, that's what they
Um,
want, right? They want those
yeah,
keywords to be
yeah.
something that can apply so that you have a little more flexibility and
It's
that you can walk into a
pretty
store.
spicy stuff. Yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah.
pretty spicy stuff, man. A lot of movement shenanigans and all that kind of stuff. So, and you still have the old green wing. I mean, you can still load up some land raiders with a bunch of hell blasters and Azrael and just start melting faces off and all that stuff across the board. And
Yeah.
Raven Wing's got some cool redeployment strategies. Just this is just like I said, stuff that I've read and heard on other podcasts and other things.
Yeah, we don't
But
even have
we'll
the
see.
the
Right.
codex, right? So I think it's going to be interesting to see. I'm also very interested. I'm a Space Wolves player, so we don't have
Hmm.
that codex yet. Um, but I'm interested to see if they're doing a good enough job of differentiating, themselves
Right.
between the different chapter books. There's always enough flavor, right? You can paint
Right.
because when they first came out with the Space Marine Codex, it felt like, oh well, now everybody gets the same rules for every chapter. And maybe with a little bit of, and so instead of a chapter, you're going to have a detachment, and that's
Hmm.
where you're going to get all your flavor, which really that still holds true. But now they're releasing a codex and they're locking the detachments within the codex, which is what we thought. And
Yeah.
the only well, not the only downside, but the big downside for me is that there's still, we talked about this so many times. We're not going to go into it here, but the whole, book versus app,
Yeah.
digital versus
Yeah.
print. And man, I,
Mm.
just looking at every time they release a codex, I wish they would have the ability to just to unlock the stats within the app if that's wherever they
Yep.
want everybody to go, or make them digitally available. And then if you are really love the army, you're going to buy the book for the artwork and maybe some extra stuff anyway. I mean, I would, and I'm not a big
Hmm.
reader. I still
Right.
want that thing that goes along with the army. So anyway,
Yeah. Me
well,
too.
overall, I think excitement for Dark Angels. You seem pretty enthusiastic about it, enough to buy the codex and some extra
Yeah.
models, that's really all Games Workshop wants to begin with.
That's
So
right. I fell for it.
very cool. All right. Well, let's wrap up here with the last topic around combat patrol. And if you've been listening to this show for a while, you know that Steve and I and the rest of the crew are really big fans of combat patrol. We've got very busy lives, full-time jobs, family,
Hmm.
the whole deal. And sometimes even though we want to play a full 2,000 point game, you don't have time. And
That's right.
even better is where we've had a game day at our local game store, Mechanical Keyboards. And what was cool is that we could have a lot of people there and have multiple tables. And we did a little, well, kind of a round robin where you play
Hmm.
a combat patrol game and then you play against someone else. And we got another one coming up, by the way. If you're in the local area, at the end of March, we'll be sending some stuff out about that. But got another game day event coming up in March, and there was a question asked within the Discord group of, "Hey, do we want to play 1,000 point game?" Like, well, I mean, we can,
Yeah.
but sometimes those go for a couple of hours, and then you're not able, if you got to go, you're not able to play two games, and so the whole premise around combat patrol is a very quick way to get a game in against multiple opponents. So the reason we're bringing it up again is that I have noticed, and I know Steve, you and I have talked about this, the last three issues of White Dwarf, and this would be 496, 497, and then 498 coming up. Um, they've had special detachments and mission
Hmm.
rules for combat patrol, and I think everybody saw this coming. We knew that this was going to happen in some form or fashion. But what I think is interesting, and even with the new issue, they just talked about this on the Warcom site, 490, 498, 499. I can't remember which
Right.
one it is. Um,
498. Yeah.
but 498, but the newest issue coming out is going to have um, like essentially multiplayer. So you've got new
That's
rules
crazy.
for combat patrol multiplayer, and we tried that without, but before they had official rules, and it to varying degrees of success. We had a good time, but it's really interesting that they're coming out with this. So the question that I have is whether or not this should be, and this is kind of what I'm interested to get your thoughts. Should combat patrol, should it replace kill team, or maybe serve as not just an entry point to 40K, but be its standalone product? Would they come out with a combat patrol welcome to 40K box set where it comes with two, instead of having, when they did the Leviathan box and you got two pretty
Hmm.
big squads of Space Marines and Tyranids? What if they did, a smaller version of that with just two combat patrols, and then it included the dice and the ruler and everything that you needed to play, maybe some paints even, and they had all of the combat patrol rules. So it would be
Yeah.
maybe a cheaper way to get into the game without all the complexity. You think they'd ever do something like that, or is that just a terrible idea?
No, honestly, I think it's a great idea. I think if you look back, they've almost already done that. When Indominus came out, you
Mhm.
first had the Indominus box. It had all the Necrons, all the Space Marines in it. Well, then they sort of trickled out, much like they did with Leviathan, these sort of tiered starter boxes. They had it all the way down to recruit box, which was just a couple like a unit of Space Marines and basically a unit in an HQ. You flip the box over, and that was your terrain.
Yeah.
Upper, there were 2 levels above that, and I think the more expensive one was what we would look at now is about a combat patrol size army
Mhm.
on each side plus terrain. I actually bought the terrain that was in the box I'm speaking of. Is it like the command box or something like that? I can't
Yeah, I
remember.
know what you're talking about. I remember
But
that.
they sold that that terrain set with all the pipes and the
Yep.
other stuff. And man, come on, guys. That would be so righteous. Put I don't even know if you I mean, you could release it like seasons like you're doing Kill Team now. Keep Kill Team what it is. I feel like Combat Patrol could be its standalone thing, but it's a wonderful narrative bridge between Kill Team and Big Battle 2000 point game. I think if you looked at it like, hey, we're expanding past this 10-man kill team, and now we're going to what's roughly 500 points ish.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now we're expanding the battle out just a little bit. And put 2 armies in there, throw some terrain with it.
I
I
think
don't
the
know.
terrain, the addition terrain would be a really cool idea.
Yeah,
I I liked that when they did that with the Indominus box. Was that eighth? No, that was ninth edition, right?
ninth. It was ninth. Yeah.
Yeah, and they had the pipes, and then if you wanted to upgrade, you buy the larger set. You could get all the buildings, and I thought that that was a cool way. That I think what was a little divisive about that set, though, is that a lot of people, apparently, I mean, I'm not one of them, don't like
Hmm.
terrain. They just don't.
I know. I
I've seen
know.
a lot of opinions to say though they don't want to spend time to paint terrain. Why would you paint terrain when you can paint more models? And I get it, but I think that's for people that may not play at home. If they're
Hmm.
going to a game store all the time, why do you want terrain? Because the game store
Right.
has all the terrain. So I get that. But for me, we've got room in my house, and I've got a ton of terrain. I've got now.
Hmm.
It was it was funny when we went to the game day at Mechanical Keyboards. I had what four tables. I had
Oh,
4 tables worth of terrain and then
yeah,
some,
you did.
and it had different scenario, environments, at snow,
Hmm.
and then the wasteland and the destroyed city, and of course
Hmm.
all the standbys. But I love terrain. To me, it's easy to make, especially the rocks, but
Yep.
the buildings when they're releasing them anyway. Um, Really cool. And I like the idea of, if I've never played before, and grandma's walking into a Warhammer store and wants to buy something for her grandkids to play, then to me, you want everything in there, because if you just got
Yeah.
the 2 armies and you don't know how to play, you don't know that terrain plays a huge factor in the
Right.
game and getting behind cover. So I think that they should bring that back. I thought that was really cool. Um, that said, the Leviathan box, I think, was extremely popular with folks that
Yes.
didn't like the fact that they included terrain in Indominus. So you're never going to
I
please
know.
everyone. I think that's the
You're
moral of
not.
the story.
Do you worry that these boxes are getting a little watered down? Like they're changing. They went from the Vanguard boxes back in the day, or start collecting boxes, I should say.
Hmm.
And now they've pushed it to now it's a combat patrol box. And you could see a minute change between those boxes, I feel like. And now I don't want to say I don't appreciate some of these new detachments that are coming out, like we're talking about. But do you feel like they're a little smaller and less like woo because the vehicles are gone? I don't
Yeah,
know. In each
maybe.
codex, there's a new combat patrol, and I don't know. The internet's kind of fired up about it, but
Of
and I
course they are.
noticed it. I'm like, but for me, I have I have what I have already, and at least they
Yeah.
haven't changed the rules. But do you feel like that could be a problem for combat patrol in itself
I
if you feel
mean,
like you're not getting the value?
for me, no.
Okay.
But I'm also not one of those that, when you go get a Big Mac at McDonald's and you're like, oh, back in
Mhm.
my day, this was twice as big, and they,
True
you
story.
know, whatever. I think that if I'm Games Workshop and I'm trying to sell more models, and the easiest way to sell models that people aren't buying is to bundle them with the models that people want to buy. That's
Yes,
the
that's
easiest
right.
way to do it, because like if you, and I remember the start collecting boxes were the same way. Whether you
Mhm,
call it, Age of Sigmar has Spearhead now. You've got
mhm.
start collecting. You've got Combat Patrol. Whatever they want to call it, if they were really smart. Now, smart, I don't know how great this would be, but if they were really smart, they would package maybe 60% of the models that you
Yeah,
want in those boxes, and the other 40%, you're like, I don't really want those, but man, I really want
right,
this 60%. That's kind of the way they do it. And I think the start collecting boxes were similar to that, but
right.
at least with the new combat patrol boxes, you don't feel like you're getting something that is not playable. So they have
It has
intentionally
purpose.
put these models in a box for combat patrol, but more importantly, they have made rules for
Yes.
those models so that it's you don't really have an option. If you want to play combat patrol, this is what you got. And
Mhm.
I think that's a good thing. I think if they did that with start collecting, you bought all the models, you assembled them, and maybe those 40% that you didn't like are going to sit on the shelf and you're never going to play with them ever, because
Yeah.
they don't have the same synergies in your 2,000 point or 1,000 point, 1,500 point army that you're going to field and play. But with Combat Patrol, they're very intentional about putting those models in, attaching rules to them, and saying, "Here you go." So I don't know if watered down. I think they could even go further if they wanted to. They could have a detachment box.
Mm.
So,
Oh,
you
that's
know,
yeah, I didn't think
and
about that.
then and then if you didn't, if you had a ton of models, you had a combat patrol, maybe you bought two combat patrols to fill everything out. They could even go to, hey, here's your Deathwing box, here's your Ravenwing
Mhm.
box, or whatever. Here's the start of those so I think they could do that. They could even take the White Dwarf, because they've started to come up with custom combat patrol stuff for White Dwarf. I've seen them for Tyranids recently. Um, they could even come out with that, right? It's a
Yeah,
limited run type stuff. So I it's all the same type of packaging, just to
right,
get the
that's
same
true.
stuff out there. So, I think they've had a lot of success with Combat Patrol. It is easy to pick up and get the rules and go play. And I think it's been much better than start collecting and the older stuff, in my opinion. Well, I don't know. What do you think?
Well,
Do you think they're watering things down?
I think they're I don't wanna call it watering down because 'cause I'll use this box as, eh, the very first Space Marine box I bought was the Vanguard Space Marines, and it was a start collecting box.
Hmm.
It's funny because it is this, super silent, super sneaky infiltrator, combat patrol that's in the magazine, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
all the infiltrators, it's the suppressors, and I think a librarian. Well, it's funny because that box got ragged on all through ninth. Nobody really wanted infiltrators and the suppressors. There, most people were like, "What are they again? I don't even know what those are." So
Hmm.
it's funny that at the end of ninth and in the 10th, like good luck finding probably. I mean, I'm not saying to say you can't find a box of infiltrators, but you're not going to find a Space Marine army that doesn't have infiltrators in it now. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's sort
Yeah.
of funny how that come around full circle. And then now the new box is full of let's say like the Dark Angels Combat Patrol box is now the newest one is I don't know, a bunch of just regular intercessors, some hellblasters, and a character. I and oh yeah, the blade guard.
Yeah.
Um, very generic. That's not exciting.
No,
I
not at
will tell
all.
it's not exciting at all. The combat patrol box that I have for Dark Angels is the original combat patrol that came out in the rules. It's got the dreadnought. It's got the intercessors.
So much better. I think the
It's got the
dreadnought is what does it
inceptors.
to me.
Yeah. And that's why I was worried about their are they getting watered down? Like, that dreadnought's pretty awesome. That's a pretty cool piece anyway.
Well, I had that
Is it
with my Space Wolves when that was one of
yeah.
the things that
Oh, yeah,
attracted
yeah,
me to the
yeah.
Space Wolves books, because I got, it comes with the intercessors, right? That's
Mhm.
fine, your core troops, but it also came with that Invictor War suit.
Yeah.
And when you see that on the box, you're like, okay, I got a cool. I think it was a captain, a character with a big axe, and then I got the intercessors. But man, look at that giant mech machine thing.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this box that they have for Dark Angels, there's nothing that stands out. It
Mm-mm.
really. I mean, it's just a bunch of ground troops, and I think they're missing. It would be cool to have maybe another dreadnought in here, or I don't know, a vehicle,
Yeah.
something.
I mean, I guess you're lucky that it's not played on a huge board, but you're not going to get very far with none of those dudes move over 5, 6 inches
Yeah.
at a time. So I don't know what you would do with that against somebody. Maybe have a vehicle or some fast moving units. I don't know, unless there's
Well, I
some
mean
deep
the hell
strike or something like
blasters,
that.
are pretty good. So I mean, at
Yeah,
least you
no,
got
they
some decent
I'll give you that.
firepower. But I agree. I don't think it's going to be as it's not as exciting. And I think that's
Mm-mm.
what we're saying here.
And that's what I was really loved about Combat Patrol when they first sort of came out. It was a nice mix of stuff. It was pretty
Hmm.
exciting. I was like, yeah, I'd buy all those models. I'm not sure if I would, go out and buy just a bunch of intercessors, hellblasters, and
No,
stuff. Well, I already have so many of those now. There was no way I'd buy that box anyway. But I'm different. I'm not your new player.
yeah.
I've been spending my
What
dollars for a while.
what do you think about the stuff that they're putting into White Dwarf and locking that behind White Dwarf? I mean, we're subscribers, right? I like seeing it
Yeah.
in there. I mean, is that something that is interesting to you? Do you like that, or is it more just an add-on?
It doesn't bother me at all. I mean, I think the rules for the base combat patrols are still free. They're still relevant. It's not like they took those units away or took those patrols away. So I'm okay with that. As long as that has stayed like it is, that's fantastic.
Yeah, agreed.
Um, White Dwarf is so much cheaper than a Codex, and you could pick one up. And there's other good stuff in there. It's not like you're getting a. It's not like you're paying $9, $10 for just a new Combat Patrol rule set. There's a bunch of good stuff in there that can't
Well, they got to
be.
do something. I mean, they can't
Yeah,
just have lore articles and pretty
right.
pictures. They've got to offer you. It's like going back to the old video game magazines that came
Hmm.
with the demo disc.
Yes,
You got
exactly.
10 free demos in here. You got to do something to make it enticing.
Hmm.
We did our couple of shows ago. We did our look back at the retro White Dwarf, and it was cool because they would send you free models with certain
Oh yeah,
issues or 6 back issues of White Dwarf. They would always give you a little something extra, and we've gotten away from that. No
yeah.
more cool like Dakota ring in the cereal box. No more the toy in the Happy Meal is kind of
Yeah,
lame now. It's a sticker. Like it'd be nice to have something a little more tangible, but I think they've at least putting in there where you can pop out the cards
yeah.
and
That's
something that you
nice.
could put on the table. So it is some of the extra value.
Hmm. And I guess at the end of the day, we've always talked about these are great jump off points for your new army or whatever. And you like we talked earlier, we were saying that at one time that was true, but there was no playability to that. You
Hmm.
couldn't really, and you're right. You couldn't really start this one of those start collecting boxes and really do much without going and buying a couple other things too.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I remember that, but it is kind of nice to keep this going, and I guess they're leaning into that. The Christmas battle boxes or those battle force boxes and stuff. Those
Those are
might
popular.
be, yeah, and I would say that that's probably where you need to go to if you want a bundle value to start a new army. That's probably going to be
That'd be the time.
their wave to go.
They could also do it then. I mean, maybe a double
Right,
combat patrol box or something. If they
right.
if they bundled a Space Marine and Tyranid or Space Marine, whatever
Mhm.
they want. They could just do one limited run box and have 2 combat patrols in there. I think that'd be pretty cool. Be
I think
something
that'd be
different.
smart.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, either way, we're always huge fans of Combat Patrol. I like that they're releasing more content. because it's such a popular way to play. It's an easier way to play. I really have enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite things about 10th edition. So I like the fact that they're putting more stuff into White Dwarf and just giving us more and more and more. I like the multiplayer rules. That's something I'm really looking forward to the next issue. So interesting to see what they will release with that. Well, we are at the end of our show here. Lots of cool stuff to talk about. It was, Steve, a pleasure as always to have you on the show. Just the two of us, and we've got more great stuff coming down very, very soon. A very cool interview in March, so be on the lookout for that. Until then, Steve, thank you so much for your time, your attention, and your service. I appreciate everyone listening, and we will catch you next time on the Dadhammer podcast. Take care, everyone.
Bye, friends.